Hey there, and thank you so much for joining me for another video. My name is Erin Eno, and today is the first of a 12-part monthly series I'm doing called Fruit of the Month. So being the first month, I thought it was fitting that I start off with a nice red apple. So grab your paints and let's get started. So to start, I'll just quickly run through my materials for you. Today I'm using my Baohong Academy cold press watercolor paper. It's 100% cotton, 140 pound. My piece is roughly 5 by 7.5. I just have it taped down because it is a scrap piece and it's a little wavy. And also I like to have it taped to a board, that way you can pick it up and kind of move it around when you need to. I have my Van Gogh paints in my palette. I have 2 jars of water, a paper towel. I'm going to be using my heat tool, I think, to speed things up a bit. And for brushes, I have 3 of my Princeton snap brushes, one in a size 12 round, 2 and 0. I know I need small brushes. I'm just not sure if I'll need the 2 or the 0, so they're both there. I also have a size 8 round in a Curry's 2500 brush. And you will also need a pencil and an eraser because we're going to draw this out before we paint it. Okay, so I'm going to start with a not quite circular shape. It's going to be a little more squat than it is tall. Okay, so I'm going to draw this darker than I really would normally, but I just want you guys to see the apple shape that we're going to start with. And then I will erase all the extra lines and I will lighten the lines that are left behind. So that is basically our apple shape. No, we're not looking at this head on. We're kind of looking at it from a slightly elevated view. So when we get up here, I actually kind of screwed that up. This should be a little rounder. Okay. So we're actually going to be, like I said, a slightly elevated view. So you're going to be able to see a little bit down into that center of the apple where the core where the stem comes out of. Okay, so it's almost going to be like a, like an ellipse, an ellipse, which is a flattened circle. So if you can imagine, the stem now is going to come out from inside there. Okay. So just draw our stem. So that's just, rather than starting the stem there, it would look kind of not realistic. And then because of that elevated view, we're going to see the front of the apple. It will kind of have a little bump. And then that will like continue around. So you will see a hard edge there when it butts up against that apple core. And it'll make sense when we start to kind of shade it and stuff. So we'll also do a leaf off of this stem, and an apple leaf is just a typical leaf shape. It's nothing fancy, nothing too detailed. It's just a typical leaf shape, but we'll put some waves in there just to give it some interest. Maybe not that wavy, just like that. Okay, so we can get rid of the extra lines like down the stem there, and we don't need to draw this circle in. We're going to get it with paint, and that is our basic apple. So I will lighten the lines with my kneaded eraser, and then we will start painting. Okay, so all the lines have been lightened. My apple is a little kind of wonky and wobbly over there, but nature does not produce perfectly round apples, so I'm okay with that. So we're going to start with this is going to be a realistic apple, not hyper realistic, but I want to give it some detail rather than just be a flat red apple. So I'm going to have a highlight right about here, and then we're also going to have some green come out of the middle of the apple and maybe down this side a bit, just because that's what you see on red apples often. You don't usually get like a perfectly solid red apple. So that's what we're going to do. And I have a little green here that I had mixed earlier, and it's permanent lemon yellow with a bit of ultramarine blue, and that gives us our nice kind of bluish green. Whoops, I did not mean to dip it into that, but oh well. So this is probably pretty good there. I don't want a lot of paint on my brush, so I'm just going to tap it off on my paper towel. And we're going to paint it here from the center out. Okay, so that's going to kind of give us that round shape from the center. And then the red will kind of blend into this. Okay, and don't lose that sharp edge here of that little curl, because that's the part that's kind of blocking the view down there. So you need a hard edge there. Okay, so I'm just going to clean off my brush, and I'm just going to kind of blend this out. Whoops, I dropped some dirty water on my painting. Okay, so I just want to feather the edge so it's not like just an abrupt end to the green. And I want to do that because red and green, when you mix them, make brown. So I don't want a real heavy green if I'm coming over it again with red. I don't think it's heavy enough that it would be an issue, but I just figure better safe than sorry. Okay, so I do want some green to come down this edge of the apple. And then we're going to bring the red into it. Kind of like, you know, so it kind of looks like it's ripening into the red. That's what we're going for. It can be a little bit here too. Just like that. And I'm going to soften and feather out that edge. Okay, so that's our start there. We can have some red come around from the back, so I'll just lighten the green a little bit towards the back. Because if it's totally flat back there, it's not going to look realistic. I'm also getting a bit of a bloom here. It's not the end of the world, but I'm just going to see if I can just clean this up. There we go. Okay. If that doesn't dry perfectly even, it's not the end of the world. So while we're working on the green, and we'll let that dry, and we'll go in and do the leaf. So I had some sap green here mixed earlier for some leaves of something else I don't remember. But I'm just going to use the sap green and a little touch of carmine, which I have in my palette here, just so it's not like a really bright green. Okay, and I'm just going to start off with kind of a medium wash, and I'm just going to do the whole leaf like that. And it is pooling, so I'm going to pick up a bit of that water. I want it to have a nice point on it. Okay, so there is our leaf, and I'm just going to clean off my brush, tap it off on my paper towel, and go in and pick up a little bit of a highlight here, just to give it some shape. Just like that. You can even do that and go in and pick up some highlights for veining. Oh dear. Okay, so I'm going to go into that green again, just get a little bit on the tip of my brush And I'm just going to start from this end and bring it down here. And the reason I'm starting at this end is because I don't want an explosion of color at the tip of the leaf. I would rather it happened, if it was going to happen, into the stem of the leaf here. Okay, just like that. And I can even make that just a little bit darker. You can switch to a smaller brush to do this, and I probably should, but I'm just being kind of lazy, so I'm just trying to just use the tip of my brush here. And that's probably a little heavier than I would like, but I can blend them out, because I'm going to add some shading here and maybe some shading along this edge and up on this top edge, just to make it look kind of like it's kind of curled, just to give a bit of movement. My mouth isn't working today. I don't think I'm speaking clearly, but at least what's in my brain is not coming out of my mouth. Okay, I don't need to fuss too much. I just didn't want it to be a totally flat leaf. Wanted it to have a little bit of interest. And that ought to do it. I don't need to go crazy. There, okay. I think that's dry enough, because we didn't use a ton of water, that it's safe to go in and do the stem while we're in here and while the green is drying. So I'm going to go in and get some burnt sienna. My palette is a mess, but I do know what colors are splattered all over there. So I'm going to take some burnt sienna, which is kind of a reddy brown, and I'm going to, whoops, keep my hand out of the wet leaf, and I'm just going to give it a straight bottom on that stem and then just drag this up. Okay, then I'm going to clean off my brush a bit and just drag it up, just so it's not like a solid blob of brown. You could even put some green in there, because it would have kind of a green kind of tinge to it too. And just to give it some darkness, I can go in with a little bit of sepia, which is quite dark. We can also go back in later once this is dry and add some more dimension to it. But I want to try to keep this fairly loose, realistic looking, but not, you know, not so overwhelming. So I think that will do. I do want to go in with that green again though, and just add a little bit more to the center and the stem of it, just like that. That ought to do it. Okay. So I'm sure the green still isn't dry, but we are going to go in and add a little shadow underneath the apple. So I'm going to use my number 10 brush. You can use a smaller brush. It's just I like this one because it does have a nice point on it. The black I have is very granulating, and I want a smooth shadow. So I'm going to use Payne's Gray, and not too much water on my brush. I'm just going to run it along a thin line along the bottom of that apple shape. Remember how I made it a little wavy down there? So I just want to run a thin line across that, just like that. Okay, then I'm going to clean off my brush, and we're going to blend that shadow out and soften it. Okay, so we're just doing a really simple shadow shape, nothing too crazy. Just to give it a little more life, just like that. Okay, and we'll let that dry. If we need to go in back later. If we need to go back in later and darken that up, we can do that, no problem. So that's all I want to do for now, and it's time to get going on the red. So I just want to make sure it's completely dry, so I'm just going to dry it thoroughly with my heat tool, and then we'll come back and do the red. Okay, so for our red, I'm just going to use Carmine, which I have in my palette here, and it's quite a bright red, so I want it a little less vivid. So I'm going to mix in a little bit of Payne's Gray into that, just to kind of tone it down a little bit, because I don't want like this bright cherry red. And hopefully, I don't know, but hopefully the Payne's Gray will give me the color I'm looking for. I'm just going to put some in my palette there, and I don't need to fuss, and it's there when I want to make shadows. So okay, so let's see if that gives me what I'm looking for. I think it will be good enough. Now I'm going to need a lot of this red, so I'm not going to clean off my brush. I'm just going to leave that there. But what I'm going to do is take my number 0. If you don't have a 0, just use like a number 2. I think my number 2 would work. I'm just, you know, I'm a little more comfortable with my 0. And I'm just going to do a light wash. And what I want to do is make it look like the red is now ripening as it comes out of the center of the apple. So I'm just going to do these really faint lines of red. And I can always build this up. I just don't want to go in, you know, with the deep, strong red, because I don't want to lose that green. Okay, and it can come right out the side here. Just like that. Maybe a little bit more. And down from the back, and same on this side. So it's kind of just creeping over into the green. And we can just get this in place, and then we can deepen it up if we feel that it needs it. I just don't want to go too dark right from the start. I can go dark right at the very back though, because we'll kind of assume that it's ripe back there on the other side. Okay, and you can go darker as you get away from the red, or get away from the green rather. I think that's enough. I don't want to overdo it, and I don't want to lose that green. Okay, now I'm going to paint this and leave a patch of green here like it's not ripe. So that's why I'm just going to not come all the way down with the red here. Okay, we're going to leave this green. So that being said, I'm going to take that wash of the red again, make more of it, and just go in with the 0 brush again. And we're going to do the same thing out at the side and the bottom. So I'm going to assume it's kind of ripe on this other side. I don't want to get carried away, but I'm just going to put the hint of red there, like that. And I'm just going to blend that out, just so it's not a solid, really abrupt edge. Okay, and then we're going to take the wash of that red. It's creeping into my Payne's Gray over here. I don't want that. And we're just going to now follow the shape of the apple and just paint some wispy kind of lines up in the following the shape of the apple, the curve. You know what I'm saying. So we're just following the curve. If you think you're going too heavy, then just rinse off your brush and just drag them up. We're going to just build this as we go too. So eventually this is just going to go right into red. And I don't want like a whole lot of the green, but I want it to stay nice and green. So just like that. So from this edge, I will now kind of just do these strokes to make it look like it's got those little kind of red stripes that you see when the apple's kind of ripening. I apologize if I'm not speaking very clearly, but yeah, it's just one of those days, I guess. So this is pretty much dry brushing, okay? So less water is what you're after here. Okay, so I think that's good. We're going to leave it. I'm not going to mess around with it anymore. And I'm going to go in and start putting in some heavier red. And actually, you know what? I think what I want to do is put a little highlight over this little hump here that kind of blocks our view from the back of the apple. And I don't want to fill that in with just straight red. Okay, so I'm going to kind of bring that down a bit. Okay, and then there will be a highlight roughly about here. So we'll now get that in place. So to do that, I'm going to start with this red mixture that I have over here, which is going to be the bulk of the apple color. And I'm going to start at the bottom and follow that shape of that shadow we did. I don't know if I should be using this number 12 brush or if I should switch to a smaller brush, but we'll see how this goes. Okay. Now you want to try to keep a wet edge because we're going to be blending this out. So I want to keep it wet and moving. And we can add shadows to it later, but we want to keep this flowing. And keeping in mind that we're putting that highlight in there. Okay, so I'm just going to actually paint the highlight, and then I'm going to feather it out. The other way you could have done this is put down water and have the red bleed into the highlight to give it a feathered edge, but I just want to have a little bit more control than that. And if this doesn't dry evenly, it's not a big deal, because it's good actually if the apple has some texture to its skin and it's not like just some solid flat red color. That's how I feel anyway. Just going to be very light with it back here, okay, because I don't want to undo what we did up there earlier. Just going to make sure this stays wet. Like that. Okay, and I'm going to go to my number 10 round, holds a fair amount of water, and I'm going to just kiss this edge so it will bleed in and soften it up. Now the highlight doesn't have to be pure white, so I can go over it with a light value of red if I want. Like if it's not bleeding the way I want it to, which it doesn't seem to be doing. So I'm going to tap it with some more pigment. There we go. And then I'm just going to clean off my brush and just kind of blend it out a bit. Okay, so I'm just kind of moving the paint around where I want it since it wasn't behaving. And hopefully that will bleed a little softer. Then I'm going to do the same thing here. And the red's drying a lot faster than I was anticipating, but I think it's okay. I just have to tap a bit more in here as well. So I'm going to clean off my brush, dry it off my paper towel, and just kind of blend this out. Being careful not to cover all those kind of wispy lines that we did. Okay, I don't want to lose those. And just soften this edge here. Make sure I don't fill in that highlight. And then here you can just blend this into those lines that we did before. Same here. Okay, so that's that. We'll let this dry and we'll come and do another coat of red and smooth everything out. Okay, so this still isn't dry, but I do want to go in and add a little more depth, a little more texture, I guess, really, to the stem here. Okay, so I'm just going in with that burnt sienna again, and then I'm just going to kind of blend it out a little bit. It was just a little too flat and uninteresting, and I want to do the same to the leaf because I've got time since the rest of the the rest of the painting is drying. We can go in. Don't mind that. That was just my other whatever. And I'm just going to kind of heavy up the stem of the leaf. And I'm almost just like dry brushing this in now. Okay, I don't want it to go nuts, but I just thought it could use a little more shape and definition. There, I think that's better. Just needed to pop a little more. So that's good. Okay, so the apple is still not dry, so I'm going to speed it up with my heat tool, and then we'll go back and put some deeper red in. Okay, so that's dry now, and it has gotten a little lighter. I can't say I'm real happy with the edge that I'm getting on that highlight, but we'll see if we can fix that up. So I'm getting a lot of pigment in my palette now, and I'm going to add that Payne's gray to it so it's not that bright vivid red, and I'm going to maybe just put a little more water on my brush, and I'm going to start down at the bottom. So we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to start at the bottom just like that. I've got a little more water on my brush now, so it shouldn't dry on me too quickly this time. Okay, so I'm going to go with my number 2 again and just blend this up. So you're going to be picking up pigment, so you're going to have to clean your brush off every so often, but I'm just, dry brushing that red up into the rest of the apple. It's already dry there. I think it's because my heat's on and it's very dry in the house, so it is drying quite quickly. So I'm going to keep my brush handy. But basically what I'm doing is I'm just dragging that deeper red up. I'm trying not to lift too much of it because that's when it's going to start to dry uneven. Okay. So we can do the same thing back here where it blends into the green. Whoops. I don't want it too heavy up here. I should be doing this from this angle so I can just kind of come in and curl down just like that. And then as far as our highlight goes, we're going to have to get that a little smoother or a little softer. Okay, so I'm just going over the bottom again because it can be deeper down here. It's good. I just want to be careful that I don't overwork it and lift the paint underneath, so I don't want to get too carried away. But I am hell-bent on softening this highlight. And if I don't get it, I'm not going to be very happy. Okay, let's see what I can do. I'll take my number 8, we'll try, or my number 10. I don't know why I keep calling it an 8. I think because it has a really nice point on it and it seems like it should be an 8. Okay, so I just want to keep that edge soft. So I'm just making it bleed, and then I'm wiping my brush off and just feathering it out. And I dipped my hand in the wet paint and got it on the side of my painting. So we'll try to scrub that up. So you can see all my mistakes I'm making, but that's okay. Okay, I think that is good. And I don't think I'm going to add any shading at, well, maybe I will, just because I don't know when to stop. I'm just going to add some darker red down at the bottom. So I just mixed in a little more of the Payne's Gray just to darken it up. And I think that's about all I want to do, except I do want to add a little bit more depth to the inside part of the core there. So I'm just going to take a little bit of Payne's Gray with the green, just a little bit, not too much, and just kind of tap some just in the very center, right up where the stem is. Okay, just a little bit, just to give it a little bit more depth there. I can soften the edge a little bit. I don't want to soften it too much because that'll just take it away. And if you're getting weird edges, you can just blend them out, but be careful you don't overwork it. Famous last words. Okay, so I'm going to let this dry. I don't want to use my heat tool because it might start to dry a little wonky. Okay, so now that that's dry, I think I want to heavy up the shadow a little bit more. Okay, and it can be almost solid black right up against the apple, just like that. Okay, and because I'm using Payne's Gray, it will dry a little lighter. I think I'm flogging a dead horse here, so I'm just going to call this done. The only thing that's kind of bothering me is that the green, there may be too much of it, I don't know. I think I'm going to just try to wisp in a little bit more red up here, because I'm just not quite happy with it. I think that's better. It was just a little too much. Too much green. It was overtaken. I like that better. Okay, so I'm gonna stop now, or I will never finish. So I'm gonna take the tape off and we can look at our finished apple. So there is our finished apple and the first fruit in the Fruit of the Month Club series. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video and that you found it helpful. I really hope you'll give this a try. And that's it. Thanks again so much for joining me, and I will see you next time.